All right. Welcome to another episode of Something I Found on archive.org. This one is a picture book of a very famous name associated with horror, but actually his real roots are in science fiction. And that would be Forrest J. Ackerman, and known for, most famously, famous Monsters of Filmland. And I think I featured one of his magazines on my channel so far, and I hope to get into another one sometime soon. But this is going to be about this particular book, and I'll post it to archive.org. You can look at my community tab or community page or whatever they call it now on YouTube, and you can figure out where to get the link for it if you're interested in downloading this thing. So this was from, I believe it was 1986, and it sold for a whopping $10.95. That's pretty expensive back in those days. But yeah, so we're gonna get into it, man. We're gonna get into this awesome publication. Now, to do it justice is just not really ever gonna happen because it's like 55 pages, so I'm just going to start flipping through this thing. I encourage you to download it yourself and read it. It has some interesting articles and memories and stuff like that. But I'm just going to start flipping through it because there's no way to do this thing justice. But again, it has a lot to do with Warren Publishing was the person responsible for famous monsters back in the day. And it gets into all the stories, and it's really quite interesting. And this guy managed to rub shoulders with every sort of hero in the film industry that he ever had. He started out as a major science fiction fan, and he even was sort of like a person who was involved with the publishing industry back when Pulp Fiction was around, and people like Robert Heinlein and stuff like that, big names in science fiction. He was involved with them, and he met with them in fan clubs and stuff like that. He was a huge science fiction nerd and fan, and he turned that, and then he started collecting, like, basically back in the day when they would make a movie, they didn't care about what was left over after the movie was made. So you now I'm just going to break from that point. Before he realized early on that half-naked women would sell his stuff, and that's what was part of what he did with Vampirella in starting that sort of thing. And so, yeah, so I think that's an interesting. He was sort of kind of made a start in that sort of trend toward, I don't know, Comic-Con, you could say, and the idea of scantily clad characters. Anyway, so he's like the grandfather of all that stuff. But yeah, so a lot of these pictures are from his house. Of course, Vampirella had a big influence on Elvira, who became involved with television and even movies and stuff back in the day. Also realizing that sex sells. Yeah, so there you go. Yeah, big fan, and he was a big fan of all the big names in science fiction back in the day. Boris Karloff and Lon Chaney and others, Vincent Price, and Peter Cushing, and Christopher Lee, just to name a few. And people who were influenced. I don't know if you know this face, but this is Stephen King. And he was influenced by famous monsters. And in fact, it'll be interesting for you to note. Oh, look, I gotta stop here. Look at this. Look at that. Is that the most 70s front room you've ever seen? I love it. I love it. We had that. Anyway, sorry about that. I just had to interjected memory. So apparently he built this massive library of everything he collected. He's a major collector. He put it into his basement, and then he'd let people come and visit and check it out. He used to love sharing his collection with visitors. People, just random people, come by his house, and he would show off his collection. Is that, if that isn't the craziest thing? But yep, that's what he used to do. So that's the collector's edition of Famous Monsters, and that's what he based the cover of this on, this book. And of course, here he is in his basement of crap, and he's even got, like, I believe that's the one-eyed poop monster from The Outer Limits. So he managed to pick up all the stuff. Now I was going to get back to the point I was making earlier. So here's the deal. Back in the day, a lot of people who made films never kept, like, a Creature from the Black Lagoon, mask, or, some part of the rubber costume. They just go, throw it out, we're done, we made the movie. We'll make a new one if we need it. So that's sort of what was happening back then. And so all of a sudden, he sees this as a great opportunity. So he decides he's basically going to collect all this stuff, and he starts collecting it and just putting it in a garage. But then he wants to show it off, because what's the point of having something and collecting it if you're not actually using it and sharing it? That's what he wanted to do, is share his collection and share his passion for science fiction. And, of course, what was more marketable back then was monsters. And so he got to know all the people in makeup, and he really highlighted the makeup artists, because typically it was just the actors who got the fame. He gave the fame to the makeup artists. And so, like, a guy like Tom Savini or somebody like that, great practical special effects artist, he would be given attention in these famous monsters and anything that, Forey was into. And so, people loved him that way. And, kids growing up, there was a kids magazine, I think that's Tom Savini there. But yeah, he was awesome for, he loved kids, and he was always enthralled by science fiction when he was a kid, movies, particularly futuristic movies. And so he wanted to share that love with all the kids growing up, because he was like a big kid. He just loved that kind of stuff. So yeah, so there's lots of stories here. Like I said, I can't do this thing justice, but you know what? Download it and just flip through it, read a few articles. Don't read the whole thing if you're not that interested. But yeah, it's kind of a great memorabilia of a bygone era in publishing that no longer exists. And if you were somebody growing up in the 70s, 80s, you probably ran across Famous Monsters, and you might even have bought a few issues. Didn't, of course, last, because when you're a kid, you rip them up and destroy them. And that would be, I think this is Bobby Breezy. Is that what her name is? Something like that. Anyway, she was in Mausoleum, and so they got her to redo the photo that sort of mimics the earliest Famous Monsters cover. There she is. Yeah, what's her name here? Bobby Breezy. I guess I'm saying that right. Yeah, she was she was always game for, the monster horror stuff, because that was what she made a living at. And of course, you've got Tom Savini and John Landis, Steven Spielberg, George Lucas. They all were influenced by Famous Monsters and were a friend of Forrest Ackerman. So such a big name in science fiction, and really and horror, and really what is he known for? Like, was he an actor? No. Was he a writer? No. Was he? He was a fan. He was the ultimate fan of this stuff. And sadly, as we approach the just over 10 minutes, he's passed away. So he lived from 1916 to 2008. 92 years, not a bad run, but you know, the world will be a little bit less bright for after his passing. He is quite a character. And that is going to be our video highlight of something I found on archive.org, and I'm going to put it right back up there and create a link, and hopefully if you want to read it, enjoy it. It's fun. And I'll talk to you later.